Welcome to the next part in the series on yogic psychology from Collector's Edition of Heartfulness magazine, December 2019. In this series of articles, Revered Daaji explains the fundamental basis of yogic psychology, which is the ancient science of Raja Yoga, discussed in texts like Ashtavakra Gita, the Sangeetha Vashista, and which was first codified by Patanjali in his Yoga Sutras. Revered Daaji enlightens us on this understanding of the human mind and the various common mental tendencies and imbalances, and he also gives us solutions to create mental well-being through heartfulness practices. We have seen Introduction to Yogic Psychology, Vrittis, Kleshas, and first 5 Vikshepas. We now commence with second part of Vikshepas. It is recommended to listen to earlier parts it from playlist before proceeding further if not done so. Revered Kamlesh Patel, also known as Daaji, he is the current heartfulness guide. He offers a practical, experiential approach to the evolution of consciousness that is simple, easy to follow, and available to people of all ages and walks of life. Daaji is also a prolific speaker and writer, and his two books, The Heartfulness Way and Designing Destiny, are both #1 bestsellers. Content in this series are Introduction to Yogic Psychology, Vrittis, Kleshas, Vikshepas. The next 5 we are going to cover here now, Vignas and solutions to them. The sixth Vikshep is Avirati, which translates as absence of renunciation or absence of non-attachment. Avirati is the result of indulging of going beyond needs to desires and of gratifying the senses. It is the opposite to one of the 4 main sadhanas of yoga, vairagya or renunciation. The overindulging of the senses can be associated with many types of behavior, but it is most often discussed in relation to sexual behavior, thoughts and attitudes because they involve all the senses. In the modern world of ready abundance and consumerism, in many countries, avirati also relates to other aspects of life, such as our relationship with food and indulging in addictive or obsessive behaviors towards other things. For example, TV and digital gadgets, drugs and alcohol. It also underpins our fascination with fashion, interior design and decoration. In fact, you could say that today's fashion and cosmetic industries are the expression of avidity or overindulgence of our sensory stimuli. Let us first explore why it is important to transcend this obstacle in relation to sexual behavior and desire. In yoga, passion is known as kama, and it is a divine emotion necessary for the continuation of the species. If tomorrow we all become celibate, humanity would disappear within 100 years. Kama can never be destroyed, but it is important to know how to manage it wisely. First of all, why does sensual energy build up in our physical system? As children, our creative energy is applied to many different activities: play, art, music, dance, storytelling, imagination, problem solving, and so many other things. Then, around the age of 15, a lot of this creative energy is channeled into procreative energy. So we can see here in this diagram creativity and procreativity cycle. So creativity turns towards procreativity around age of 15. With awakening and purifying the heart, we again can go back to creativity. Where does the energy in our system come from? It accumulates in us when we eat food, drink water, and take in energy from the sun and other sources. In many of us, it accumulates in the lower chakras, as it cannot easily move up into the higher chakras unless and until they are awakened. These lower chakras govern our basic instinctual survival nature, and they are known as the Muladhara, Swadhisthana and Nabhi Chakram. When our energy is centered in these lower chakras, we function like other animal species, with our focus on basic survival instincts, eating to survive, competing with others for resources, and procreating for the survival of the species. There is a very big difference, however, between other animals and human beings. Most animals eat simply to survive. They don't take more energy than is required. Similarly, most animals have a defined breeding season, once a month, once every few months, once a year, etc., so that the number of young born is well regulated and the species manages its population size naturally. They utilize the energy input and output in a very regulated fashion that has developed through years of evolutionary process. Human beings, on the other hand, have distorted the natural patterns and cycles because of desire. Because of the buildup of energy in the lower chakras, sex acts like a safety valve, a release, in which the energy taken in is released back into nature and the buildup is dissipated. Our relationship with food is also associated with the lower chakras. But instead of dissipating energy, eating adds to the energy balance, compounding the problem. And overindulgence in food can lead to blockages in the energy flows of the human system as the pranamaya kosh becomes burdened. This is one of the reasons why fasting can be so beneficial in balancing the human system. Ramachandra of Fatehgarh wrote about this balancing of energies in a letter to one of his associates in 1924, saying, "Let us observe keenly our anatomical structure and understand the various faculties active within a human body. Let us consider only two of these in the first phase of our study. These are the two basic instincts, satisfying hunger and thirst, and satisfying the carnal desire, which is rampant. The feelings of hunger, thirst, and the need for sleep indicate that there is deficiency of nutrition or water, or that the body is tired, lacks strength, and needs rest and recuperation. This results in the desire to satisfy that feeling, which is fulfilled by nature through the mind and senses. In Hindi, this desire is called Kama Shakti, the force of passion or sensual desire. Corporal desires are also part of Kama Shakti and relate to the instinctual need to reproduce. But the other limb of the same Kama Shakti is subtle and does not fulfill the deficiency, instead ejecting the surpluses and fulfilling the deficiencies. So, the human seed or seminal fluid, which accumulates in the cavity of the body until there is no more room, is ejected by the subtle force. Finally, if this essence, which is thrown out of the body, is implanted in a fertile womb, the other wish of nature is then fulfilled, namely, that from one there become many. Surplus and waste substances that accumulate for long periods in the body breed poisonous matter. This you can witness as a result of constipation or of being unable to urinate. But an excess of semen creates a sense of embarrassment and affects the wisdom of the heart. By doing a regular yogic practice with the help of a capable guide, we are able to shift the fulcrum of energy upwards. This happens in heartfulness from the very first meditation sessions with a trainer when the heart chakra is awakened. The yatra or inner journey is activated, and as the chakras are traversed, the center of energy moves upward so that the human system becomes a transformer. Energy is transmuted into more and more subtle states. Matter becomes energy and eventually it becomes absolute. Physical becomes subtle, becomes causal. The most peripheral and complex eventually becomes central and pure. In addition, Heartfulness offers a simple morning practice known as point B cleaning, which is done first thing in the morning in order to manage the build-up of sensual energy. It is practiced for 5 to 7 minutes as follows. Fix your attention on point B. Point B is given here, which is one finger down from the ribcage cavity and then 4 fingers towards left. Imagine that all impurities and heaviness are going out of point B from the front of the body. Imagine that as this process is going on, the glow of the soul begins to appear from behind. Just as celibacy is not the natural state, at the other extreme, passion can also get out of hand and end up in sex addiction or perversion. Through heartfulness practices, instead of either extreme, the procreative energy is managed and balanced. For this purpose, the cleaning of point B works as a passion detox or sex detox, so that sensual desires are no longer overwhelming. Imagine the harmony that would result in human societies if people practice this technique daily. Life then takes on a different dimension and a new meaning. Nature transmutes to sequentially higher stages of supernature. Consciousness transmutes to sequentially higher stages of superconsciousness. This is how our being expands and our subtle bodies can disengage from their close attachment to the physical body. The center of our pranamaya kosh of the energy flows in the human system settles in the heart, where it belongs at the middle link of our existence. Ramachandra of Fatehgarh wrote, "The heart, being at the center, functions to absorb the effects of the higher and lower regions, which is its characteristic." He demonstrated this in a simple diagram. He shows in this diagram the three worlds: head, that is top, the world of Chaitanya or consciousness, this is the higher world, the middle world is heart, and foot is the inert world or the lower world. As each chakra awakens with the support of the guide's transmission, the energy moves higher and higher, and sensuality is no longer the driving force. Sex offers a more physical form of ecstasy because it involves the outer senses and desires. When love is also there, it is not purely physical. It can also involve subtler aspects, but it is still at a lower level. Higher bliss, known as Ananda in Yoga, which emerges naturally with the spiritual journey, is more subtle than lower physical pleasure. The more subtle it is, the more potent. This is why yogis have run after bliss and extolled it so much. But they can also indulge in desiring the ecstasy of these subtler forms of bliss. Avirati is perhaps even more of an obstacle in these higher realms as it is so potent. Many seekers have been caught in this trap of meditating to find their bliss. Many wait for those intoxicating states of consciousness that can be found in deep meditation in various stages of samadhi. They are not willing to renounce this bliss to go beyond it to the absolute state. In such cases, meditation is also like a drug for ecstasy. This is one of the biggest hurdles in spiritual journey, moving beyond Satchidananda to higher states of reality and nothingness. As Ramachandra of Shahjahanpur once said, I feel irritated to see someone acclaim Satchidananda. This is like a worm feeding on cow dung and admiring its flavor. The Satchidananda state is nothing compared to Laya Avastha. Even in marriage, over a lifetime together, the pleasure and bliss in each other's company becomes more and more subtle until eventually it reaches a stage of apparent nothingness. Some time back, I was lucky enough to observe an elderly couple taking a stroll along the river in Princeton, New Jersey. Their steps totally in sync. You could see they had been together a long time. They didn't need to speak much, communicating their togetherness in the subtlest ways. They settled on a park bench overlooking the river, pulled out a flask of tea and some sandwiches, and together enjoyed their lunch in perfect silence. Their movements were in tune. The way she poured the tea was full of gentleness and care, as was the way he received the cup. They ate their sandwiches and enjoyed the stillness of the riverside. They had reached a stage in their marriage of purity in connection and communion. This is the other end of the spectrum from the days of young love when a couple is more physical and verbal in their demonstration of love. Now extrapolate this evolution to a higher dimension altogether, and you will have some idea of where we may be headed with seeking subtlety in spiritual realm. And eventually, a subtle state of vairagya arises very naturally, without force or repression, because the field of consciousness has been purified. The seventh Vikshep is Bhranti Darshan, meaning false perception, delusion or blindness. It is the opposite to another one of the four main sadhanas of yoga known as Vivek or discernment. If we define consciousness as the degree of perception, when we falsely perceive, it interferes with our consciousness and its evolution. In fact, Vivek and Vairagya are the foundation of mental well-being and come about naturally as a result of yogic practice. Both Avirati and Bhranti Darshan arise when we go in the opposite direction towards dissonance, disharmony, entropy, separation and complexity. How does false perception arise? And how do we distinguish what is false and what is true? In order to understand this, we need to go back to the beginning. Try to experience the original state of our being, where there is only stillness, nothingness and total peace, by meditating with transmission. From the center, everything we think and do emanates. We can call it the default position, the zero position, the balance state. Of our three bodies, it is our soul that is at home in that center, in the balanced state of nothingness. Now contrast that with the interplay of senses, thoughts, feelings and tendencies that draw us out in the world of movement and thinking, creating the various Vrittis in the field of consciousness. But our soul is also embodied and is connected with the physical body, so the soul, the Atman, is also involved in movement and thinking. Atman, Atha means movement and Man means thinking. The soul is just as much at home with the movement and thinking as it is with stillness. There is a constant dance between stillness and activity, between activity and repose. Therefore, in yoga, we try to maximize the potential of all three: stillness, thinking and movement. To do this, we do two things. Turn our attention inwards during meditation towards the stillness of the center and refine our outward activities so that our thoughts and movement are in tune with our inner nature. Then they are conducive to evolution, happiness, and balance. We cannot rest in the stillness all the time, and that is also not the aim of yoga, which is just as much about skill in action. So, instead, we learn to integrate stillness and activity in our daily actions. In this combination of stillness and activity, lived out in purity and simplicity, the soul can shine, radiating inner joy and happiness. When the waves of the Vrittis calm down during meditation, we see our true nature. As we master the art of meditation, we then can externalize that true nature into our daily activities. This is another one of specialities of heartfulness, to carry the meditative state with us into other 23 hours of the day when we are not meditating. What complicates and pollutes the purity of the balanced state? The impressions that are activated and then accumulate in our heart-mind field of consciousness. As the vrittis become colored and repetitive, forming a web of complexities that is then mirrored in the neural networks and pathways of our nervous system. These we call sanskar, and they create cognates by which we perceive the world. Layer upon layer of them, so that our perception can be likened to looking through many lenses of different colors until eventually we cannot see clearly at all. If we are not regularly removing these impressions, it will be like driving at night through heavy fog. We see only a few feet in front. There is no clarity, no vision, and no larger perspective. It is like the old English proverb, you can't see the wood for the trees. More specifically, as per the spiritual anatomy of heartfulness yoga, it is only once the 5 chakras of the heart region have been purified and traversed up to the throat chakra or air point that real clarity and discrimination, that is viveka, become the natural state of being. In fact, vivek is not as simple as distinguishing between right and wrong. It is also distinguishing between two right things and knowing which is more appropriate. True vivek enables us to discriminate against anything that interferes with our goal or purpose in life. As a case study of Bhranti Darshan, Rohan is a 25-year-old. He is very successful engineer living in Silicon Valley, California, with a good salary and a generally healthy lifestyle. He has had a few girlfriends, and each time a relationship ends, he feels dejected, hard done by, mistreated, and betrayed by women. By now, he has come to expect this to happen, feeling that women are using him for his money and success. Everything is always their fault in his eyes. This makes him sad because he really wants a permanent committed relationship and marriage. Will he embark on a new relationship with openness, or is he likely to start with the false perception that all women will use and betray him? He is not even aware of this pattern. He is blind to his own prejudice, as it has become an automatic subconscious response. His subconscious cognates will surely sabotage the next relationship from the outset, without him knowing that he is affecting the outcome. Anyone new will gradually be forced to live up to his expectation of failure, unless he becomes conscious of the patterning and chooses to remove it. How will Rohan change these patterns? The most effective way is to remove the past impressions or sanskar that has accumulated in the subconscious mind. In heartfulness, this is done daily during the evening practice of cleaning. After a few months of heartfulness practice, Rohan is already noticing big changes in his inner environment. Some of his old habits have already left as a result of cleaning practice, and he has learned simple ways to change his behavior. Gradually, he is mastering his emotions and approaching life with positivity and confidence, along with more openness and humility. Through heartfulness meditation and prayer, he is also learning to listen to his inner voice through the heart, develop clarity, and make wise decisions. His heart is opening and becoming more generous. The obstacles are melting away one by one. Bhranti darshan is easily reversed by removing the sanskar that are the root cause and developing the generosity of heart to accept a true perception based on purity and clarity. Failure to attain the next stage and failure to retain a stage. Alabdha Bhumikatva is the Vikshep where we are not able to attain the next stage or level in the spiritual journey, and Anavasti Tatvani is the failure to retain a stage once it has been given. There can be many reasons for these two obstacles. They may occur because of lack of interest, lack of determination, a feeling of impotency, or because we are not able to refine our character in order to maintain a spiritual level. Especially at the higher spiritual stages, such a profound level of humility, nobility, or character and dependency on a capable master are required. And acceptance and self-transcendence are vital for progress. We need constant help from the master to refine ourselves in order to become eligible to enter and retain these stages. How do we work to overcome these two obstacles? The first thing is to understand that our potency comes through our connection with the source, with God, through the heart. Individually, we are impotent islands, whereas once we are connected, our full potential is realized. We are connected to the source of life itself. The easiest way to stay connected with the source is to associate with a master of the highest caliber who can transmit the essence of pranahuti from the source itself. The spiritual journey is only a way to expose more and more of that connection by uncovering the layers that keep us separate. Prayer and meditation are both ways we evoke and maintain that connection. The second thing is to understand that spiritual progress is not linear. It proceeds with a natural rise and fall. At each stage of the journey, that is, at each chakra, point or not, there is a sequence of experiences which is beautifully explained by Ramachandra in his books Towards Infinity and Voice Real. First, on entering into every successive knot, there is a slight feeling of heaviness in the mind, on account of which people often discontinue the practice. But if we take into consideration that every attack of illness is followed by the restoration of good health, we will be better encouraged to attempt a crossing of the knots. Second, after this heaviness comes a peculiar state, awakening within the mind a consciousness of the divine force pervading all over. Third, next, as we become more attuned to the new stage, we experience a divine state prevailing everywhere and everything absorbed in its remembrance. Fourth, but this does not last. As we merge more and more with the new stage, there is neither feeling of divine force nor that of remembrance, but only a feeling of negation. Fifth, eventually everything is gone, no impression upon the heart, not even that of existence. So when we progress to enter a new chakra or not, there will always be a feeling of discomfort and restlessness. Just as when we move location in our worldly life, there is change and upheaval. Only once we settle into the new environment does our consciousness open up to a higher level of awareness, and then we start to experience divinity from that higher level. This is a joyful and beautiful experience, and we feel that we have moved forward. If we continue to progress, we become so merged in that level that it becomes part of us, and then we lose awareness of its very existence. I repeat, if we continue to progress, we become so merged in that level that it becomes part of us, and then we lose awareness of its very existence. It is now in our subconscious mind, and there is only a sense of negation or nothingness remaining. Eventually, even that is gone. But there is a trap in this cycle. Generally, we like the blissful high periods and assume they mean progress, while we associate the stages of restlessness and nothingness in this sequence with a lack of progress or even a regression. We become disheartened without understanding the bigger picture. Attachment to bliss can be a big hindrance for us. When we feel so blissful, we want to live in that state forever, and the idea of moving away from bliss often creates resistance. There is the possibility of infinite expansion at each chakra, but it is horizontal expansion. It is better to move even 1 inch into higher dimension than expand infinitely at lower level. That is why it requires an effort even to move 1 inch, and most of us fail to understand the significance of that little effort in moving further. Swami Vivekananda describes it thus: some days or weeks when you are practicing, the mind will be calm and easily concentrated, and you will find yourself progressing fast. All of a sudden, the progress will stop one day, and you will find yourself as it were stranded. Preserve. All progress proceeds by rise and fall. So courage and faith are required to avoid losing hope and focus in the progress. If we keep starting and stopping, nothing is possible, because our neural pathways need the automatism of regular practice to become so well established that our new level of consciousness becomes habitual, automatic, and subconscious. Why is there such a need? It is so that our mind is freed up to learn new things at conscious level. Unless and until this habitual nature is established, any activity remains conscious and incomplete. Once it becomes subconscious, we have fully imbibed and become one with spiritual stage. That is why it helps so much to have one goal and to keep reminding ourselves that we need to reach the goal even if the journey is difficult at times. But perhaps the biggest reason we are victims of alamba bhumikatva and anavastitatvani is our inability to change our character and behavior. As a result, we don't remain a spiritual level even if a capable master takes us there. Often, we are not even cognizant of the character traits that we pull us backward. And even when we are, we may think that we have changed, but then a stressful situation takes us back into old habits again. This is such a common problem that nature, in her generosity, has given us each other as mirrors. We see that everyday life. Anything that annoys us in another person is what we need to work upon in ourselves. Without a noble character, spiritual progress is of no use. Swami Vivekananda has described it beautifully. Stages do nothing at the time of death. Moderation is required, and that is lacking everywhere. Spirituality alone can do nothing. It must go side by side with morality. This aspect of psychology is why Yama and Niyam are the first two steps in Patanjali's Ashtanga Yoga. Yama is the removal of all unwanted qualities, and Niyam is the integration of noble qualities in the refinement of our lifestyle. And in Heartfulness, we have so much help with both these steps. Meditation allows us to introspect and evaluate ourselves. Cleaning removes the root sanskar that result in behavioral habits and tendencies. Prayer gives us a way to connect with the divine and submit our weaknesses and faults so that we can change. Every day, we can recalibrate and follow a path of continuous improvement. It is a simple solution to one of the most difficult problems facing human beings since time immemorial. Fear of missing out, FOMO, and digital distraction. I have added these two Vikshepas to Patanjali's list as they have only surfaced as serious obstacles to progress in the modern era. FOMO is described by researchers as the uneasy and sometimes all consuming feeling that you are missing out, that your peers are doing, knowing about, or in possession of more or something better than you. It is exacerbated by the fact that we live in the world of WhatsApp, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and constant news on our smartphones. It is a fear that others are living a better life and having more fun. It stems from a sense of envy, leading to a feeling of helplessness. Advertisers are always preying on this insecurity by inviting us to buy products that will enhance our sense of belonging. Those can't miss out experiences, be it a new car, a bigger house, the latest kitchen products, and the newest smartphone or the latest fashions. FOMO is not new. It has been around for centuries, but it has become more obvious since the advent of social media. The first scientific studies were done by marketing strategist Dr. Dan Harmon in 1996, and the acronym FOMO was coined by Patrick McGinnis in 2004 in the Harbors. Since then, it has been studied more and more frequently as modern phenomena. Social media are both a cause and effect of FOMO, which is characterized by a desire to be connected with what others are doing. Social media feed this Vikshepa. We could even say that social media are the modern opiates of the people. They are so addictive. Unfortunately, social media posts the highlights of people's lives, so we are always comparing our lives with the best of others. People show their best side on social media or the sensationalist side to get attention. It is a biased view of life. It is not reality. And we compare ourselves to that, and it becomes an unfortunate competition. FOMO is associated with all walks of life, ages and genders, and is a very real and common feeling in today's world, stemming from insecurity and a feeling of lack and sometimes leading to physiological symptoms and behaviors. Many sufferers are simply overwhelmed by the amount of information needed to keep up with current activities and trends. FOMO is associated with a negative effect on overall mood and life satisfaction. Where does this lack really come from? You may blame social media, but are they really the culprits? In fact, the fundamental sense of lack of inner lack, in fact, the fundamental sense of lack is an inner lack, a lack of inner contentment, of inner connection, a feeling of not belonging. Someone who is connected to their own source every day, every hour, every moment is contented in their own being, irrespective of what others have or do. There is a sense of confidence and courage to live in the world without competition and comparison with others, without succumbing to peer pressure or media pressure. Finding that inner contentment is actually very simple. Meditate, go within, and experience the connection. With transmission, it is even easier, as transmission is the connection. Hence, heartfulness meditation is a natural antidote to FOMO. FOMO has become inextricably linked with the digital era, and digital gadgets provide their own problems. First, There is the amount of time people spend watching screens instead of communicating face to face with others, playing sports, reading books, going for walks, or simply being in nature. The classic is when you go to the restaurant and see four people sitting at a table for dinner, all of all on their individual smartphones instead of talking together. Second is the radiation associated with these gadgets. Electromagnetic technology is an integral part of our lives. Wi Fi, the internet, Bluetooth, mobile phones, computers, tablets, microwave ovens, medical equipment, and all the other man made sources of electromagnetic radiation in our environment. Today, we know much more about their effects. In 2011, WHO's International Agency for Research on Cancer announced it was classifying electromagnetic fields from mobile phones and other sources as possibly carcinogenic to humans and advised everyone to adopt safety measures to reduce exposure. There is now a field of research known as bioelectromagnetics, and authorities in many European countries recommend that people use hands-free to decrease radiation to the head, keep mobile phones away from the body, and do not use a mobile phone in a car without an external antenna. Our subtle body is an energetic body which has its own electromagnetic field created by the negative and positive polarity of charge. As a result, the subtle body is affected by other energy fields in the environment. For example, the buildup of positive ions in the atmosphere before a thunderstorm creates restlessness, while the release of negative ions once the storm arrives brings relief. In nature, everything is in a state of dynamic balance, with complementary energy flows switching like alternating current throughout the day. The same sort of alternating pattern is seen in the complementary sympathetic and parasympathetic currents associated with the Surya and Chandra nadis in our bodies, where at times one predominates, then the current switches to that other predominates. Then there are the main inflection points at sunrise and sunset, the stationary points, where the turn of the flow is more prominent, like the turning of the tide. We see these patterns of polarity at the macrocosmic and microcosmic levels, whether in the planetary movements or in particles at the atomic movement. When we add man made electromagnetic fields to our environment, they interact with our natural EMFs. So, the stronger the man made EMF technologies in our environment, the more likely they are to affect us. Some people get headaches, rashes, nausea, and nervous complaints. The effects happen first at the level of subtle body, the energy field, and eventually filter down to the physical body. A few years back, a group of schoolgirls in Denmark did an experiment. They were experiencing difficulty concentrating in school, and when they slept with the phone next to their head, they sometimes also experienced difficulty sleeping. They took 400 watercress seeds and placed them in 12 trays, 6 in the room without radiation and 6 in the next room with 2 Wi-Fi routers. The seeds were given the same amount of water and the same conditions of light. After 12 days of cress seeds next to the router did not grow so well, and some of them mutated and died. The experiment drew international attention, and scientists replicated it with controls, other experimental variables, and using other plants. I have tried it using mung bean seeds in 4 different environments with astonishing results as follows. I would suggest that every child do this experiment so they can see what for themselves the effect that radiation has on living organisms. One of the Danish students said after finishing their experiment, None of us sleep with the mobile next to the bed anymore. Either the phone is put far away or it is put in another room and the computer is always off. Here are a few simple things that will help to reduce this Vikshep. First, turn off Wi-Fi when it is not in use and at night during sleep. Second, use your mobile phone in the car only when necessary and don't charge the phone in the car. Third, keep your mobile phone in a bag, not in your pocket against your body. Fourth, switch Bluetooth on only when needed. Fifth, keep your phone away from your bed at night. And sixth, don't give small children phones to play with. Digital technologies have revolutionized our global network, but today many of us are dependent on them to the point of addiction. The radiation they emit is harmful to health because of its effect on our subtle bodies, our consciousness, and only time will tell the long-term effects of constant use. Today, we look back at the ancient Romans and wonder why they were so foolish as to use lead utensils for cooking, resulting in lead poisoning. We look back at the 20th century and wonder why so many people smoked cigarettes. Will the people of the 23rd century look back at us with the same disbelief in our rampant and unregulated use of digital technologies? Guilt and shame. There is one more Vikshep that I have added to Patanjali's list, as it is often a crippling obstacle to progress and indeed to every aspect of living, and that is the Vikshep of guilt and shame. What happens? What types of impression dominate our lives? They can be so many. For example, worldly worries, sensuality and sexual attraction, prejudice, greed, grief, sadness, self-pity, jealousy, guilt and shame. As well as impressions formed by our thoughts and actions, we also form impressions by our inactions, creating even more guilt. These are the things that we should have done but did not do, and such things haunt us all our lives. For example, we may have hurt someone very dear to us without ever having made amends. Impressions like that are difficult to remove. Most of the other emotions associated with human heart have some redeeming purpose and help us on our natural journey when used constructively for the higher purpose. Even the so-called negative emotions like anger, fear and worry. But at first glance, it is hard to see much value in guilt and shame. Other than that, they indicate we have a conscience. Someone who feels no guilt and no shame for anything is amoral and psychopathic. Is there a difference between guilt and shame? Guilt is a feeling that arises when we have either done something or not done something for which we feel responsible. Psychologists explain it like this. With guilt, we often want to make amends and apologize for the hurt we have caused. Our attention is on the feelings of others and correcting the situation. Guilt can eventually lead to socially adaptive behavior. Shame, on the other hand, is focused inwards so that we view ourselves in the most negative light. Shame is the result of having transgressed the values and principles we hold dear. We are no longer authentic because we have lost our integrity with respect to our heart's wisdom. To overcome this, we have to forgive ourselves and find ways to change the inherent patterns that caused the transgression in the first place. When shame is the result of someone else's behavior, as is often the case with the internalized shame that is found among victims of child abuse or domestic violence, the problem is even trickier because children do not know how to deal with their feelings when the perpetrator is someone they love and rely on to protect them. They are helpless even though they know that what has happened is wrong and against their heart's wisdom. Dr. Chris Germer has written, shame is probably the trickiest human emotion. It's everywhere, so we barely see it. It's also the glue that makes other emotions stick around longer than they should: fear, anger, guilt. It also happens that sometimes we choose to go against our conscience because our desires and mental justifications push us to make another choice. And until we change our thinking, we will keep recycling those experiences and habits. Guilt and shame really drain our energy, pulling us further and further away from our center. In terms of chakras of the heart region, guilt and shame lodge at point D, one of the satellite points around the heart. Here we can see the point location of the point D in the diagram. 1F down from the rib cage cavity, 4F, 4 fingers to the left is a B, 2 fingers down is C, and again 2 fingers left is point D. They are impressions that give rise to a lot of heaviness in the heart, and they are the most difficult to clean. It is rather very difficult to remove impressions associated with guilt and shame. The Heartfulness way offers a very effective practice that can be adapted as needed. At bedtime, feel the divine presence in your heart and repent for anything you had done wrong, even if it was unintentional. There is no recrimination in this process. While resting deep in your heart, prayerfully resolve not to do the same again. You will feel as if burden has lifted. You can also present any questions and confusions to your heart right after offering prayer. There is no need to seek an answer immediately. Sometimes the answer will come by the time you wake up. Even if the answer comes in another form than words, the solution will eventually arise. To remove guilt and shame, a commitment of a very high order is required, and cooperation at every level. For this, we need self-compassion, self-acceptance, and courage. We need to open up and let go. The best time to do this is before sleeping at night. When we let go of these heavy emotions at bedtime, imagine the positive effect it will have on our sleep. We do not need to remember all the things we have done or not done, because when we truly open ourselves, what has to be removed will be removed. Tears will often come. There will be many such sessions, and over time the heaviness will gradually dissolve. In Heartfulness, when we meditate with transmission and practice cleaning daily, guilt and shame will surely surface to be removed. They come to the surface to live, so there is no point struggling with them. It helps instead to remain focused on where we are headed on our purpose. Once we understand this, it becomes much easier to cooperate. In the words of Dr. Chris Germer, self-compassion is the antidote for guilt and shame. As our system is being vacuumized, all the complexities are being pulled out, and then we are filled with lightness and with the universal knowledge and the divine wisdom we require to lead a properly balanced life. For this purpose, the help of a guide of caliber is beyond value. Here we complete Vikshepas. In the next video, we will read about Vignas. Thank you for listening. Please do subscribe to Heartfulness magazine at www.heartfulnessmagazine.com. Next video will be the last video in this series. Thank you for listening.